Hey everyone, it's Kai from Kaiser CDC and welcome to my new series called Up for Comparison. In this series, we're going to be taking a look at 2 or 3 very similar, if not identical knives, and I'll be bringing them to you and showing off some of the similarities and differences. So today we'll be taking a look at this, the Spyderco Ikuchi, and we'll be comparing it against another Spyderco Ikuchi. The difference being this one is post CQI, which is constant quality improvement, and this is pre CQI in the Spyderco lineup, which means that this was first generation and released somewhere earlier along the line in 2019. We will also be taking a look at some of the differences between the construction of these two and in terms of materials, if there are any changes. So here they are side by side. As you guys can see, completely identical in nature. For size comparison, we'll be looking at standard Pilot G2 and also a Hinderer 3-inch XM18. As you can see, it's a longer, kind of slender blade, definitely more than 3 inches. According to Spyderco's website, it says it's around 3.26 inches in blade length and about 3.7 inches in terms of handle, which would mean this would bring it to a total of 7.6 inches, roughly. So, let's talk about materials. In terms of materials for both of these, we will be looking at S30V blade, ground fairly thin behind the edge, as you guys can see. Fairly thin blade stock. We have a compression lock on the back, which is, Spyderco trademark. We have a wire clip, and for handle materials, we'll be looking at carbon fiber G10 laminate. This is not real carbon fiber, as you can see from the side. Doesn't have that wavy carbon fiber look to it. It's just a matte carbon fiber sticker on top of these G10 handles. So it's basically just G10 that looks kind of like carbon fiber, if you will. So, for both of these, we will also be having phosphor bronze washers, no bearings, as you guys can see in there, fairly thin. On this one, they would be slightly thinner than they would be on the post CQI. So just for comparison's sake, we'll be looking at the pre CQI on top and the post CQI at the bottom down here. So, what makes this knife unique exactly? Well, there's a few things. Firstly, it has this pizza cutter kind of flipper tab on the top, which has been gemmed. If the camera would focus, there we go. It's been gemmed, so it makes for a fairly unique flipping action where you would flip it, unlike a traditional flipper like the 3-inch Hinderer, where you push down on the flipper tab and it goes up like that. There we go. This one's unique in the fact that you have to push diagonally down with the pad of your thumb touching the jimps, and you would have to push down enough so that it builds up that strength, and you preload it so that it shoots out like that. So it's more of a motion thing. You need to do it smoothly in one motion, and you really gotta mean it. So that's it for the action and what makes the flipping action unique. What else makes this knife unique? The blade sits completely flush with the handle, as you guys can see here. A completely flat and smooth design. That blade doesn't go above the scales at all. Compared to something like, again, the Hinderer's 3-inch, it just looks, a bit wonky, where it looks like it's a bit thick over the top. Well, none of that on the Ikuchi. It makes for an incredibly clean and slim design. Very smooth and very slim in your pocket as well. It's what some people might call toothpicky though. When you pull out the blade, the reason it fits within the handle is because the handle's long and slender, and so is the blade. So the blade has to be fairly thin and fairly long in order to fit within this handle. So instead of having like a thick wide blade, it has a very slim, very thin blade that fits within the handle like this. But this also brings up some issues we're going to be talking about later. What are some differences between these two knives, the post CQI and the pre CQI? What has Spyderco changed in their constant quality improvement? So, The main difference between these two is the action. Compare that to this. There's a very clear difference in action, reason being inside both of these. You probably can't see it right now, but there's a extra bushing inside the post-CQI model, which leads to less surface area contacting the pivot and the side of the scales. So what this means is that it makes it more frictionless and allows for this drop shutty action, as you guys can see here. If you guys try it on the pre-CQI, it's tough. It's more of a snap shut compared to a drop shut on this one. What else was made different? So apart from the smoother action, we also have a recessed tip and heel, meaning that, as you guys can see here, it looks flush, but this part is slightly on the top of the scales. Some people complain that this led to some catching issues with the tip in their pocket. Mine on the pre-CQI didn't have any issues whatsoever, but if you really try to push your finger in there, I can feel the tip and I can feel it scraping against my finger. So that's mildly dangerous, but you know, not an issue whatsoever. The bigger issue to me would be this heel, where if you drop shut on the compression lock, I can feel it touch my fingernail, which is getting really close. If I really try to push my finger in there and rub against the heel, I feel like there's a chance I'm gonna cut myself. However, we don't have any of that on the post-CQI model because it's completely recessed. I'm trying really hard to dig my fingernail in there and there's nothing happening. Same with the back on the heel here. So it's a better thought out design considering it's second or third generation as well. What are some of my thoughts on both of these knives, the post-CQI and the pre-CQI? I think both of them have something in common, that being that they're very, very nice, slim dress carry knives. They're very thin, fairly thin at least. I measured this one behind the edge around 30 thousandths BTE, which is not super good, but on the pre-CQI model, this was actually ground thinner. Supposedly this would be a factory defect because of how thin it was. The blade stock on both of these aren't super thick as well, so they come down to a nice fine edge, as you guys can see. They're super nice for slack carry or, you know, with suits or anything that is fancy. It's definitely a lighter use kind of knife because if you look here, considering the geometry, it might be a bit thin and it's more prone to breakage in hard use, so definitely wouldn't recommend cutting any hard material with this. It actually looks a bit like a steak knife, so food prep and stuff would probably be fine as well. It's a bit thin and some people definitely won't enjoy this toothpicky kind of profile where it's too long and slender. I personally quite like it, especially because of the fact that it does fit within the handle completely and it looks very, very nice and clean. The jimping on the flipper tab can also be seen as a bit too aggressive. If my camera would focus, let's have a close-up. As you guys can see, there are these like fairly aggressive jimps, and when I was trying to work out this knife for the first time, I was trying to use it like a regular flipper, and that ended up kind of serrating the tip of my thumb a bit. So that ended up being, you know, a bit of a detriment, because if you really push down and you're really trying to flip it, there's a very high chance, you know, it'll leave some marks. Definitely not horrible though. The detent is quite strong, so it's definitely something you need to get used to. It's a diagonal motion and not a traditional flipper motion. Considering the aggressive jimping on both of these and the stronger detent, that's something you should keep in mind if you're looking for a flipper with a little bit of, you know, a lighter detent. This is definitely not going to be perfect if you're looking for a lighter detent, because the moment you push it through and you preload, it's just going to fly out. So do be careful of that, as you know, if you're looking for something that's comfortable to flip all the time and fidget with, this might not be the best option. So what are some mods that I think should be done on both of these if you're planning to keep them? I would definitely keep the post-CQI model, considering how I prefer the drop shot action. Like that. It's more fidgety, and also the issues with the back and the tip were fixed. Some mods I would recommend would be maybe some light sanding on the jimping so as to prevent your finger from slipping too often. It would also make it more comfortable to flip if you're flipping for a prolonged period of time. If you have the pre-CQI model, I would also strongly recommend maybe sanding down or filing down that tip just a tiny bit, because it is catching quite badly on my finger right now. Another mod I would recommend is to get some custom scales, because I'm not a big fan of the G10CF laminate. It makes it a bit too heavy, and I'm not a huge fan of the way it feels and looks. It feels kind of, you know, like regular G10. Not a huge fan. It feels kind of cheap in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. If you guys don't like the wire clip, it's also completely possible to get aftermarket replacements for these. So no problems there. So what it comes down to for both of these is, do you like the design? I personally really like the long slender profile, and the action is honestly fantastic. So nothing really much to complain there. The only issues are a little bit strong of a detent and a little bit of aggressive jimping, but both of those can be fixed quite easily. If you're a big fan of the design and you're a big fan of the profile and you need a nicer gents carry, and also the thought of aftermarket scales interests you, that's something you can look out for. These are fantastic knives for gents carry. Lastly, we'll be talking about the price. For both of these, I bought them aftermarket. They retail for $140 US. I got this one in a bundle for about $90 US with another knife, so that would bring the secondary value for this around $70 or $80 for the pre-CQI, even though they're a bit hard to find. The post-CQI, on the other hand, would run you about $90 to $100 secondary and $140 US on the retailers. So both of these knives are really nice and up for comparison. Not much to say here apart from, if you prefer the action, get this one. If you're looking for something cheap, get this one, if you can find one to begin with. Both are really nice knives and they're very similar in profile. We also have a very good action. We have a nice slim carry, a nice design, and just overall a nice gents piece if you're looking for that, not at a high price too. So that brings us to the end of this up for comparison video. I hope you guys found it insightful and interesting. Let me know in the comments if there are any other knives that you want me to take a look at and put side to side for comparison. And as always, there's more to come, so stay tuned. Take care, everyone.